Let me start.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me start. In both what you said now and also in the class on talking about the drug trade, you mentioned the necessity of offering the poppy farmers alternative employment and alternative types of income. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Sure. Of course, as we know, the supply of drugs in Afghanistan is because of global demand. The fact that we are the largest producer of opium, poppy, and heroin is because there is demand in the immediate neighborhood, in Pakistan, in Iran, in Western Europe, and here in North America. And so demand, of course, and supply finds its ways in countries like Afghanistan, where governance is weak, where insecurity is rife, where poverty is abject, and so that's a problem that we not only have to fight drugs in Afghanistan primarily through provision of alternative livelihood assistance on a long-term basis to poppy farmers on the one hand, but also through effective law enforcement in Afghanistan, but more so regionally and globally. As we know, the drug problem it's a transnational problem, it's a global problem because of the way drug traffickers operate as organized crime. And so it's not, of course, a problem that we can only address by fighting it in Afghanistan. And so that's why over the past 7 years, the problem has only increased. Of course, there has been periodic decline in cultivation and production in Afghanistan, but if you look at 2001 up to now, you will see that the production and cultivation has only gone up because we have just, tried to address one side of the problem, and that very ineffectively, unfortunately, that we have, as I pointed out in the remarks, we have more focused on eradication. And eradication in an environment where governance and rule of law are weak, basically, is vulnerable to corruption, meaning that those who have money to avoid eradication, they do so, and those who don't are, of course, most of the poor farmers. And if you eradicate their poppy fields, then you effectively push them to the Taliban side. And so we need to fix that situation in Afghanistan, and the way to do that is to basically, of course, commit to a long-term strategy that helps develop rural Afghanistan. And that starts, of course, by giving poor Afghan farmers a grace period of at least a year, and during which we also provide them with alternative sources of employment, both on-farm and off-farm. And at the same time, of course, rebuilding infrastructure that is needed for the farmers to transport their legal crops from farms to cities, and from, of course, cities outside the country for, profit enough to switch to legal crops. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, we have to really, redouble our efforts in the fight against the high-value drug traffickers, because they are the ones who drive the narco business in Afghanistan, in the region, and throughout the world. And there are some estimates that the cost of, or the value of drugs produced in Afghanistan is some $30 billion on the black market. So in effect, we are fighting a $30 billion enterprise in Afghanistan. If we spend $1 billion or so, more or less, and mostly focus that on eradication and do nothing about drug traffickers, then we are not going to succeed in the war against drugs. So it has to be a multi-pronged strategy, proper sequencing of programs, law enforcement, alternative assistance within that program in Afghanistan on the one hand, and as well as really doubling our efforts regionally and internationally to fight both domestic demand and as well as in transit countries like Pakistan and Iran. They're not only consuming but also transit countries. Strengthen law enforcement and fight the problem as a whole international body. So to the extent that we make our efforts collective and coordinate strategically, both on the supply side and demand side, and as well as in transit countries, we will make an impact. If we fail to do so, unfortunately, even if we down the road, we eliminate drugs in Afghanistan, it will shift to some other country where the environment is conducive. And if we look at the history of drug production, you will see that the production of drug has shifted from region to region. It used to be in Southeast Asia, which used to be called the Golden Triangle, then to, of course, golden kerosene to Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey. Once those countries, of course, developed and the state institutions were, strong enough to fight it, law enforcement wise, they were able to push it out of their countries, and the problem, of course, popped out in Afghanistan without a government under the Taliban, and now a weak government without resources from the international community. So once we, achieve this, our goal of eliminating drugs in Afghanistan will move. So the problem is one of strategic. So for a strategic problem of this magnitude, we need to find a strategic solution that's multi-pronged, long-term, that is not fought only in Afghanistan, but in the region and on a global scale. Thanks. Sure.
You touched on this a bit in terms of getting the new products off the farms and out into the world. Talk a little bit about the infrastructure and rebuilding of roads and things like that, because it would seem to me as a country at war, even as you're building things, they may be bombed again. Can you just talk a little bit about how the infrastructure is being redeveloped?
I agree. Security is prerequisite for everything else, particularly for economy. Infrastructure, as I pointed out, we have been able to rebuild the Afghan National Ring Road, which basically connects the center, Kabul, to periphery provincial centers, and those provincial centers to neighboring countries. And of course, there have been secondary and tertiary roads that have been built, which help with transportation of agricultural or horticultural products to provincial and markets, and as well as capital Kabul and outside. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. But unfortunately, in the south and east, security is a major problem. And now drugs is also isolated to 5 southwestern provinces where the level of violence is the highest and where the Taliban are the most resurgent. So it's directly correlated, insecurity with drugs and poverty and opium poppy cultivation. So that's why in Afghanistan we need multi-pronged strategy that the international community commits to supporting and providing the requisite resources. And we do have that in place, the Afghan National Development Strategy, on which we spent at least 2 years. And it has 8 pillars and some 5 cross-cutting areas that we need the resources for to implement. Of course, as I pointed out, the last June's donor support conference in Paris, the strategy was discussed, and as well as our national priorities of revitalizing Afghanistan's agriculture, rebuilding roads, providing electricity, and of course as well as building our national security institutions. And the international community, some 40 plus countries that participated, that pledged funds over the next 3 to 5 years. But we do, as I pointed out a while ago, request that those funds be dispersed as soon as possible and be channeled through government institutions if possible. If not, then through joint mechanisms such as Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund, which allows the Afghan government and the international community to implement reconstruction projects together to make sure that the aid that they are providing is making an impact, is effective, that is not being wasted on petty projects and isolated projects without, consultation with the Afghan government and people.